I'd like to thank everybody for coming out this evening. It's a beautiful evening, and we have a lot of information to share with you this evening. My name is Jim Paxton. I'm a health educator with Three Rivers District Health Department, and I've been working with the Heroin Impact Leadership Team for about 1.5 years now. And what I want to do is I introduce these people on the panel. I'll let them tell you a little bit about their background. And if you would please, you should have a card to write questions down. There will be opportunities at the end of the presentations for questions. And then of course there's booths out there where additional information can be found. So without ado, let's begin with Detective Ryan Marcus from the Campbell County Police Department.
Good evening. On behalf of the Campbell County Police Department and Campbell County Invitation tonight, I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. I've been a police officer for approximately 11 years.
Yeah, I do.
I've been in the Campbell County Police Department since 2007. Prior to that, I worked with the South Police Department. Since being with Campbell County Police in 2007, I worked patrol for about almost a year, approximately a year, before being assigned to work with criminal investigations. While working in criminal investigations, I started working in narcotics enforcement and started working with the Northern Kentucky Drug Strike Force, writing cases in 2008 and 2009 on a part-time or case-by-case basis. In 2010, I was granted a full-time position to work with the Northern Kentucky Drug Strike Force to work on mid to upper level drug trafficking. I spent about 3 years there, and then in May of 2013, I was asked to transfer to what is now called the Campbell County Drug Task Force. Just to kind of give you a little bit of insight what we're seeing as far as from a law enforcement standpoint here in Campbell County. I've gathered a few numbers from the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, and I'll explain them to you now. In 2010, the Commonwealth Attorney's Office reported there were 680 heroin-related indictments. Those are felony indictments. In 2011, the law changed, making things more difficult for law enforcement. In 2011, they started giving a total of 2 grams of heroin off of a heroin trafficker in order to prosecute a C felony. Prior to 2011, if it was any amount, it is a C felony. So it didn't take long for that word to spread from across the river, which was the majority of our heroin traffickers were out there in Cincinnati. Once they learned that our laws had changed, they started coming back. And then so we need to get it back up there to any amount that it was C felony. So in 2012, there were 968 indictments, and then again in 2013, there were 1,074 indictments, and these were all related to heroin. Based upon those facts, it was in November of 2012, the Campbell County Commonwealth Attorney's Office, along with the County Attorney's Office, realized there was a need for a street-level narcotics unit. As I said before, I was assigned to the Northern Kentucky Drug Strike Force, which at the time was pretty much the primary investigative office for investigating drug trafficking here in Kentucky, operating in Campbell counties. Once they realized the need for the street-level narcotics unit, they decided to go ahead and the Highland Heights Police Department started with them, Highland Heights Police Department, Newport Police Department, and then Campbell County joined in 2013 in May when I came over. In addition to that, Fort Thomas Police Department has since came on board and as a detective that's assigned to work full-time with us and works only here in Campbell County. Our primary focus is on heroin trafficking. Also, the Raleigh Police Department has, here in the recent past, has dedicated officers 30 days at a time to assist us in whatever way we deem necessary, whether it's manpower or writing cases or just extra help, because it does get pretty busy for us. Our main focus is, like I said before, is on heroin traffickers in Campbell County and those that choose to come from across the river or other states to traffic heroin. As I said before, we focus on street-level narcotics, and we don't work on any long-term investigations. We work on short-term investigations. We look at the guys standing on the street corners down in Newport, Dayton, Bellevue, even out here in the county, and that's what we focus on. The Northern Kentucky Drug Strike Force focuses on the larger scale investigations with the mid to upper level drug trafficking. With both of us working together, and we're working on trying to attack these drug traffickers from both ends. I have a few quick facts about the Campbell County Drug Task Force that was compiled. Like I said, we just started in November of 2012. And so from November of 2012 to November of 2013, the Campbell County Drug Task Force, we made 241 cases on 134 different suspects while using less than $10,000, which is a pretty big achievement. And the majority of those cases are trafficking and heroin-related cases. As far as where our problem lies, you probably figure it out. It's in Cincinnati. Cincinnati's aware of it. They're overwhelmed with it just like we are, and as well as a lot of the country. They just have too much and they're overwhelmed. And that's obviously a lot of time on the attorney's office, all the counties and the attorney's office realize that we need this to the level we need. A lot of these drug deals are coming from across the river. They're coming over here. They're taking up residents in girlfriends' homes, boyfriends' homes, other users' homes, and they're trafficking out of those houses or apartments or whatever. And they're thinking that we're not going to be able to tie the heroin to them anymore. Just a couple things in closing. The biggest thing we need, like I said before, is the laws need to be changed to back to where it used to be prior to 2011. We need to have it to where any amount of trafficking of any amount of heroin is a Class C felony. And the difference between Class C and Class D is 1 to 5 or 5 to 10 years, depending on how much time they actually spend in jail. Depends on a lot of things, we're going to be looking at other things. Myself and Michelle Snodgrass will be available afterwards. She's in the audience here somewhere. And for questioning, if anybody has any questions for us.
Dr. Kalfas? I'm also, this is your timing. When you see that, you got 2 minutes.
Glad I'm colorblind and can't see yellow. Now, if I sit for the whole thing, it's going to get too boring, so I hope it doesn't come across sounding too preachy. If Pastor Breen starts yelling amen at me, I know that I'm getting preachy out there. So, as Jim said, my name is Dr. Mike Kalfas, and out of all the town hall meetings I've done, I've been looking forward to this one because this is my home. I live just a few miles from here, and I just kind of like Detective Marcus said, I want to tell you a little bit about myself and how I got into this and where I'm from. Where I come from in this whole thing. I'm an '86 graduate of Campbell County High School. Yeah. Got my undergrad degree at Northern in pre-med. Went to UK for medical school. And from '93 to '96, I did my family practice residency at Bethesda in Cincinnati. In '96, I opened a family practice office down in Falmouth, and in the back of the old drug and alcohol unit. And within a year, God did something funny. He flooded Falmouth, so the drug and alcohol unit almost closed, and I ended up front. I always tell people it took a flood to get me in the front of the building. But I ended up working part-time with the drug and alcohol unit, and the idea was it would be temporary until they found somebody, until they got back on their feet. Well, I kind of fell in love with addiction medicine and stayed with it. And in 2000, I got board certified in addiction medicine, and I remain that to this day. From '97 until 2011, I was medical director at Falmouth. And to this day, I still, my family practice office, probably about 30%, 40% of my time is dedicated specifically to addiction medicine. So I feel like that's why I'm qualified to tell you the stuff I'm about to tell you, where it comes from. When I started in '97 doing the drug and alcohol unit, there was probably 1 heroin user admitted about every month. That's how common heroin was in northern Kentucky. We were a pill town. A hardy opiate habit for someone who was addicted at that point was about 6 to 8 Vicodin in a day, or Percocet. That's what it took in the late 90s for someone to have an addiction problem to an opiate. Now, an opiate is any drug that reacts in the brain and the body similarly to morphine. The weaker opiates that we see out there are things like pain pills like Vicodin and Percocet. They move up the food chain. Heroin is an opiate drug that was invented 1870s, 1880s, and it was invented as a spin-off of morphine. And actually, it's kind of interesting about heroin. The first 50, 60 years that it existed, it was a fairly mild drug because people took it through their mouth. They swallowed it. It was in elixirs and tonics. And you'll see all kinds of things that turn to the 1900s where People were using it for stomach ailments and things like that. With the advent of the hypodermic needle, when people could start injecting it, they found that this was a very vicious intravenous drug, much more potent than the oral form. So that's when the addictions really took off with it. But an opiate is really any drug on that continuum that reacts in the morphine class of drugs. So what happened in the late 90s, and some people question me on this, but I'm just gonna call it like I see it, okay? There was a drug that hit the market called OxyContin. Now, medications a lot of times are like handguns. If you know what you're doing with them and you're safe and you're comfortable and use them appropriately, they help people. You wave them around like an idiot and people get hurt. And OxyContin got waved around like an idiot a lot. And we had a burgeoning problem at the end of the 90s with OxyContin. Now, what OxyContin is, it's like those little Percocets I was talking about a minute ago that people were addicted to 6 or 8 of them. Well, if you started taking an OxyContin, if you got a 40 milligram, that had 8 Percocets in it, just in one pill. You get an 80 milligram OxyContin, it had 16 Percocets in one pill. People found out they could crush it, snort it, dissolve it and inject it, and get a rapid high rather than the 12 hours that the OxyContin was supposed to take effect, and get it all at once. And that's where it became addictive. Law enforcement did exactly what we asked them to do. They got it off the street to a large extent. When the early 2000s, when they started getting it off the street, no one gave a thought to what to do with the people that were addicted. I think people grossly underestimated the number of people that were addicted to this drug already, that had these vicious opiate habits. And within a couple years, since we got a lot of the OxyContin traffic to stop, these people ended up becoming sitting ducks for the heroin dealers. The same Mexican drug cartels that had been supplying the area with marijuana and other drugs for decades said to themselves, hey, all we have to do is, instead of bringing a package this big, we can make the same money out of a package this big. And we've got a ready-made market with these people, so they just moved right in and started supplying. So there's a steady progression. Back in the 90s, early 2000s, you'd see people that were addicted to pain pills first. And then as their appetite, their tolerance increased, and they got more and more of an increase to tolerance to the opiate drugs, they ended up on heroin. Nowadays, heroin has become so prevalent that a lot of people are just starting on heroin. But you still see that pattern. People that are doing pain pills eventually can't pay $10 a pill anymore for their drug. And they have to move up to heroin out of necessity. Because usually, if you're doing 4 to 6 Vicodin a day, you can switch to heroin for $10 a day, initially. And you can snort it. But as time goes on, your tolerance goes up, your need for the drug goes up, and you need more and more. Eventually you start shooting it, and that's just a vicious cycle. It just keeps building. So the problem started with a pain pill problem in the late 90s, and it's progressed to the heroin issue that we see today. And I feel pretty comfortable about those facts. That's what I witnessed. One of the things that I was taught when I started doing addiction medicine was that addiction's a disease, and I believe that. When you give me the definition of a disease is something that has a certain set of symptoms, has certain treatments, has a predictable course, and any kind of addiction is a disease. When people are overcome by the disease of addiction, they really have a problem. Their brain's just not working right. Their brain's out of balance. It's not working properly. All they're concerned about is not going into withdrawal. And they will behave sometimes, I'm not calling them animals, but they'll behave like a caged animal to avoid withdrawal. Because that's the thing they fear the most. They don't want to be sick. They don't want to not have the drug. So they're acting somewhat outside themselves. When I started in addiction medicine, the people at the Drug and Alcohol Unit trained me, and they trained me on an old alcohol model. The old model for addiction with alcoholism was very simple. When people reached a certain place and became contemplative, when they wanted help, when they hit rock bottom, when they'd lost enough, they would decide, okay, I want this out of my life now. I want this to be done, and I'll work hard at my treatment. That's called a contemplative patient in recovery terms. A person who would come into treatment, but really in the back of their mind, they still wanted to get high or drink or whatever, but they were willing to play ball with you. They were willing to work the steps, work the program to stay out of trouble. But in the back of their mind, they still wanted to get high. That was called a pre-contemplative. Well, in the alcohol abstinence model, we used to feel about these folks, we can't help them. There's not much we can do. With alcoholics, it's still fairly true. When they're pre-contemplative, there's not a whole lot we can do to help them. We wait for them to become contemplative, and then we can get them into AA, and they can do things. The problem with heroin is they all die when they're pre-contemplative. And that's the big difference. When you're saying, why doesn't, with alcoholism, you take alcoholics and put them into rehab and detox them, you send them to IOP, intensive outpatient counseling after outpatient therapy, and AA meetings. You wonder, why doesn't that work for them? Why does it work for alcoholics and not heroin users? Well, because they're all pre-contemplative in the heroin users. And in the old alcohol model, we didn't treat those people. We just said, well, I guess we'll see you next treatment. You'll come back in. So we have to make a decision as treatment professionals. Are we just going to wait until they come in? Because if I take heroin users in general, and I put them in a detox bed, and I do nothing else for them, keep them for a week. When their withdrawal stops, I send them to an outpatient program. Does anybody know about what percent are still clean in 6 months? 5% or less. So with an alcoholic, it's 30 or 40%. That other 60% I'll get you next time, because chances are you're not going to die before, unless something happens, like a car wreck or something, that alcoholic's not going to die before, 2 years from now when they come into treatment again. The heroin addict dies. So what prompted me around 2003 was to look for another option. And at that point, I got the license for something called Suboxone. And when I say that word, I know immediately a lot of connotations come up in people's mind, because you have seen people abuse it, people divert it, etc. And again, I'm not saying that anything is perfect, but what Suboxone allowed me to do is take motivated people that I could convince to follow my set of rules, and I was able to take that 5% and make it 50 or 60%. And that's a huge improvement. I mean, 50, 60% means I'm still losing 40%, and I hate that. But it's better than losing 95%, because the alternative is death. And you're going to hear some about this in a minute. And I wish I had that drug about 2 years earlier, and our next speaker is going to talk to that just a little bit. The main concept when it comes to, and there's a reason for me telling you all this, because I'm going to ask you for something at the end of it. I'm actually going to give you guys an assignment. But the more research I've done into it, I've grown into treating this epidemic myself by trial and error, by growing up here, by growing into the field, by going to national conferences, by reading up on it, by going to American Society of Addiction Medicine meetings, American Board of Addiction Medicine certification. I've done my homework, I've done my time. And if you want to help these people, which I do, because they're the people we love, right? I mean, everybody, I reckon if I had a show of hands, everybody here has been touched somehow personally by this addiction, period. If you want to help them, it's mandatory that we have something called medication-assisted treatment. And when I say medication-assisted treatment, I mean either there's a blocker drug called Vivitrol or Naltrexone. It's actually not addictive, and if I had a lot more time, and if people want to talk to me afterward, I can talk more about these medications. Vivitrol is a shot you get once a month that makes it very difficult for you to get high, and makes it extremely difficult for you to overdose. The problem is you have to be sober 7 days before I can give it to you, and without enough detox beds, I can't get people sober for 7 days to get that shot. It is expensive, but it's helpful. Suboxone is another option, and says methadone. Now, I want to talk to y'all real quick. You're not holding up that sign. So. Yeah, Joey, I got to move because he'll yank my leg if I don't pull me off the stage. But let's think back a second. I talked about opiate drugs, and what I want you to think of this drug. A drug is like a key. If a receptor in your brain is a lock, and the drug is a key. Heroin or any kind of opiate drug, morphine, Vicodin, is a key that goes into the lock, turns the lock, and something happens, okay? There's a receptor in your brain called the mu receptor. It's after the Greek letter mu, mu. When that's stimulated, it is extreme euphoria. And anybody that's ever experienced excessive stimulation of the mu receptor will tell you that it's like everything in the universe just comes together at once. I've heard it described like that. I've also heard it described in other terms that I won't repeat in mixed company, but people will tell you that it's just the most intense pleasure you've ever experienced when that gets stimulated. And 20% of us actually have a mutation of that receptor where it becomes aggressively stimulated when you're exposed to something. So that is where a lot of these young heroin addicted people, the minute their receptor hits that heroin, it's like latches onto it and they have to keep using it. It's actually genetic. People that alcoholism runs in your family, you probably have that mutation of the mu receptor. The reason that one person's an alcoholic, grandpa's an alcoholic, dad's an alcoholic, and junior's a heroin addicted person, it's a matter of exposure. Okay, let's be real here, guys. The same thing that made us all sneak and take a sip of whiskey out of our dad's liquor cabinet when we were a teenager is the same thing that makes these kids snort a little heroin or snort a pain pill. That's where it starts. The problem is with the whiskey in the dad's liquor cabinet, he got a hold of this with a switch, and we didn't touch it anymore. With the heroin, that mu receptor is so strongly bound that they just can't, that's all they can think about. They're focused on it, and they're locked into it. What Suboxone is a key that goes in the lock and breaks off with only a quarter turn and doesn't open the lock. So Suboxone, for 98% of these people, does not stimulate the mu receptor, but it does keep it from being empty and it balances the brain chemistry. Now when we get to methadone, and I promise me, give me 2 minutes, I'm good. When we get to methadone, I will. There, I'll get my time back. With methadone, what methadone does, well, let me back up for a second. In the 1960s, there was a Dr. Rice. He was the first doctor to ever look at this as a disease. Like I said, the hypodermic needle came along, heroin intravenously becomes a problem. By the 1960s, there are people in all the major cities in this country that are just majorly addicted to heroin, and it's a huge problem. So Dr. Rice says, about time a doctor looked at this. So Dr. Rice studies the problem, and he comes to some conclusions. His conclusion was simply, this is a chronic brain disease. It's not curable. They're always going to have it, and it will lead to death, period. They will die from it. It's ultimately fatal for everybody. Kind of like the same mentality we used to have about HIV and AIDS, you know. This is going to kill you, you're going to have it, we can't do anything about it. So he came up with an idea, if we could just come up with a medication that we could give somebody once a day under medical supervision to maintain them, they can at least have some kind of life. But the minute they stop the medication, they'll regress back into disease and die. Which is kind of what we do with like an HIV patient today. You've got to take your Truvada or your drug therapy, and your count will be zero, and if you stop taking it, the disease will come back and you'll die. That was his idea about heroin dependency. So the idea that you'd never get off of methadone. Now we know that's not completely true. He used methadone for this purpose because it was cheap, easily made, and it had a long half-life. It would last all day. So, long story short, he's partially right. There are some people that stay pre-contemplative, like I said earlier, for a long, long time. And we have to keep them alive until they get contemplated because they're people we love. Provided they're not breaking laws and things like that. I am in no way advocating that we tolerate severe lawbreakers. You know, you're carrying a gun around, you rob a liquor store. I'm sorry, society's got to be protected from you, okay? I'm talking about people that are suffering from a disease here. We got to help them, all right? We got to make that distinction. Some people do get off of methadone. They do get off of it. The brain has what we call plasticity, which Charlotte's going to mention. It is possible for that brain chemistry to return back to normal, but it takes time, generally at least 1 to 2 years. So I told you all I was going to ask you for something. I mean, there's a purpose to this. What really happened a few years ago really upset me. When you guys remember when Ernie Fletcher was governor, he signed away, was it 6 facilities in the state of Kentucky? The check was written, we're going to build 6 200-bed facilities for young men in the state of Kentucky to get better from addiction. It took us, what, 5 years to build Grateful Life Center? 10 years. It took us forever to build Grateful Life Center because every time they started to come up with a place to put it, the people would say, we don't want that here. We don't want these people here. You know, at our last Heroin Impact Committee meeting, Ian Barnum, one of our friends that works with us, showed us a map of East Price Hill in Cincinnati. And the map had an X everywhere they've been finding needles laying around. Trust me, it's everywhere in the community. Okay, those needles are everywhere. Where there's needles, somebody was using heroin. So saying we don't want this here is the dumbest thing we can do because it's here. I'd much rather have it in a building where we can identify it and treat it than out on the streets wandering around wondering what to do. So what I'm asking from you all is I'm asking to advocate treatment. I want you to be in favor of putting these things in to treat people. If you hear that they're going to open a methadone clinic, methadone clinics are not all evil. Some of them are poorly run, not all of them. If they're regulated, they can help people. Like I said, these things are like handguns. If they're used appropriately, they help people. If they're waved around foolishly, people get hurt. I'm asking you to be treatment advocates. I'm asking you to see this as a disease and just to be compassionate about treatment. And I know I promised to be done, but I got to get one more dig in because this is coming. There's one other thing that's coming. We're not done yet. Does anybody know what hepatitis C is? Okay. 12 to 14 years ago when I started as a doc, I saw hepatitis C every now and then. By my estimate, probably 60 to 70% of our drug users now, IV drug users, are hep C positive. Okay? And now, the fact that there's not 60 to 70% HIV positive is nothing we've done right. It's dumb luck. Okay? It's just that we've not gotten a group of users into that heroin pool, that IV pool, that has spread the disease HIV yet. When a few HIV users get into this pool, in 10 years, I'm suggesting we're going to have 50% HIV positivity in this group. Okay? Are we ready for 10 to 12,000 HIV cases in northern Kentucky? It is coming. Many of you have listened to the news. You heard something called Senate Bill 5 that got shot down earlier this week. One of the reasons it got shot down is because they tacked a needle exchange program. Now, I know people don't want to think about, well, let's just give them needles. But I'm telling you, if we don't exchange, have the people addicted, able to bring the dirty needles in and get rid of them and give them clean needles, we're going to have a problem with HIV down the road. You are not going to make anybody use IV drugs just because you're giving them a free needle. They're not going to come get that needle if they weren't going to do drugs to begin with. The difference is if we can get a needle exchange program going, maybe we can slow this down and not have 10,000 AIDS cases. So with that, you want to hammer me that on questions, please do. I'm going to introduce our next talker, Ms. Charlotte Wethington. Charlotte is a longtime friend of mine. She's going to tell you about her experience and her son Casey, who is the reason I wish I had a Suboxone license 2 years sooner. And I'll let her take it from there.
My name is Charlotte Wethington, and I'm here because I'm Casey's mom. That's the main reason I'm here. This is hard for me tonight because of what's happened this week, because Senate Bill 5 died on the vine, and here we are again talking about it. Casey died in 2002. We've been talking about it for more than a decade. I'm tired of talking. I'm tired of talking about it. We've got to do something about it. And there are things that we can do about it. The things that Dr. Kalfas was just sharing with you. It's not as if we don't know what to do, we're just not doing it. That's the problem. We got some wonderful news today. My husband is back in remission from his cancer. When he was diagnosed, we were able to get for him the best oncologist, get him in a clinical trial. 6 months later, he had a stem cell transplant. He was a new man. 6 months after we found out Casey had the disease of addiction, we were burying him at Spring Grove Cemetery. Big difference. Because Casey did not get the same care and attention as my husband did. He needed it. He deserved it. He didn't get it. Why? Because there is such shame, stigma, and discrimination that surrounds this disease. Now, my husband's cancer went out of remission, and no one said to him, Mr. Wethington, you've had your chance, you've had your shot at treatment, you're not going to get any more. That wasn't what he heard. They got him right back in treatment again. They gave him a different kind of medicine. He, as I said, just learned today he's back in remission again. Now, do you think that if he goes out of remission this time, that again, that they would say to him, sorry, you've had 2 times, you don't get any more treatment? Absolutely not. Because what we know is that they're going to follow him for life. For life. Ever how long that is. You know, there's a gentleman by the name of Dr. Tom McClellan. He was the Deputy Director of the National Office of Drug Control Policy at one time. And he says, imagine what it would be if diabetes were treated in the same system of care as addiction. I can imagine that. If diabetics were not given the kind of treatment they're given, we would have more people in diabetic comas. We would have more people losing limbs. We would have more people dying from a chronic disease. Now, with the diabetic, we don't say, you have to manage your diabetes with diet and exercise, and if you don't do that, then tough luck. No, they're given insulin. And they're given insulin for as much as they need and as long as they need it. But yet, we are reluctant to use medications that we know work. Dr. Kalfas just gave you some statistics on if they don't have medication, what the result is. We get much better results if there's a medication to assist in their treatment. Not that it is everything, it is just an adjunct to other treatments, other things that go along with that. Because right now we don't have any one silver bullet to take care of addiction. Now I hope that some of you live to see the day when there is a cure for addiction. Because I believe at some point in time there will be. I won't live to see it, but maybe some of you will. I hope that you do. But more than that, I hope that I live to see the day when addicts and alcoholics are treated as they deserve to be treated, in the same system of care that we would treat any other chronic, progressive, potentially fatal disease. Now, as I told you, my son died almost 12 years ago. It'll be 12 years, August the 19th. At that point in time, the best I got was that Casey had to want to loosen up and hit bottom. As you heard Dr. Kalfas say, at that point in time, they were treating heroin addiction like alcoholism. It's not. If you've heard addiction is addiction, not. If you've heard a drug is a drug, not. When I walked in transitions, and I worked for transitions now for 9 years as a recovery advocate, and when I walked in the door and I talked to the executive director, Matt MacArthur, and the assistant executive director, Karen Hargett, one of the first things that I said to them is, heroin is a different animal and we're going to have to treat it differently. I've been with transitions long enough now to see them initiate a medication-assisted treatment program, and I am so grateful for that. At that point in time, I wouldn't have given you 2 cents for transitions coming on board with that, because they were still in that mindset. But as Dr. Kalfas said, you know, it may take years for someone to go from the 1st to the 4th stage of addiction with alcoholism. With heroin, you're there. You're there. And the next time they use, maybe the last time they use. You know, when we realized that Casey had the disease of addiction, and he asked for help, and you see, I had bought into that. I thought, you know, these guys must know what they're talking about. These are the professionals. I just need to listen to them. What am I? I'm just a mom. Now, granted, I had just a gut feeling that something was wrong. I couldn't put my finger on it. I didn't know what to do about it. but I didn't trust myself. If you don't remember anything else I say tonight, trust yourself. If you think something is wrong, there probably is. You need to do something about it now. Don't wait till tomorrow. Tomorrow may be too late. So anyway, with Casey, I knew, I just suspected that there was something wrong with Casey. But like I said, again, I couldn't put my finger on it. I was trusting the professionals that they knew what they were talking about. So when Casey came to us and said, I need help, I'm addicted, but he said to OxyContin. It wasn't heroin, he said. It was OxyContin. And later he would tell us that he thought it would sound better if he told us OxyContin. Because you see, OxyContin comes in a nice, clean little bottle. It comes from the pharmacy. It doesn't carry with it the same stigma as heroin, because you know you're supposed to be the dregs of society if you are a heroin addict. There's a picture right there of someone that was addicted to heroin. He's not the person living under the bridge in a box. You know, I thought when Casey died, that was enough. I thought one person was enough. When we lose one person on a railroad track, what happens? How many people have we lost in almost 12 years? I can't even count them. So anyway, I thought, well, you know, when he came to us and he said that he wanted help, that he needed help, I thought, well, we've got this thing licked. This is good. We'll get him help, no problem. And guess where we called, or he called, because here again, he had to be the one to call. I couldn't call and make arrangements for him. He had to call. Now let's think about that. You know, here is a person whose brain is not working normally. He has a system, a reward system that's saying go, 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 and he has no stop system. That prefrontal cortex is not working. There is nobody home. No communication between the two systems. And we're asking that person to make a conscious, rational decision. How irrational is that on our part? So, Casey made a call. He called Transitions, ironically enough. Now, and that day, I had no clue that I'd be working for Transitions in the future. I had no clue. I had no clue I'd be a recovery advocate. This wasn't in my plan. My plan was for Casey to graduate from high school, go to college, get a degree, find someone he loved and cared about, have a good job, get married, have children. I was going to be a grandmother. I had it all figured out. Didn't happen. Drugs came first. So, anyway, he asked for help. He went to St. Luke Falmouth, where Dr. Kalfas was, and at that time he didn't have the Suboxone. And Dr. Kalfas told me later that, you know, if he had had it when Casey was there, our story might have been different. But he didn't. And Casey left. And after that, there were 3 overdoses. With each overdose, we were, of course, at the hospital. The first time, he was on a respirator when my mother got there because we were out of town. The second time, he walked out with me and said, I have a love affair with, well, that was the first time he walked out with me. He said, I have a love affair with heroin. And, you know, Dr. Kalfas was, you know, for those of us that are not addicted to heroin, we can't even begin to describe the hold that it has on a person. I mean, it's just unfathomable, the hold, the power that it has over someone. So anyway, I had no clue what that meant. The second time he overdosed, when we got there, there was a nurse on the floor on her knees talking to Casey, and she was trying desperately to get through to him. Now, remember, he just overdosed. They'd given him the Narcan. And And so, anyway, she couldn't get through to Casey, of course, and she finally looked up at me and she said, "Honey, he's still too young. He hasn't lost enough yet." And I said, I didn't know how prophetic my words were going to be when I said, "What if he doesn't live to be old?" And then on August the 9th, he overdosed for the third and final time. He was in a coma at University Hospital. He laid in a coma for 10 days, and finally we were allowed at that point in time to make some decisions for Casey, but it was too late. Because you see, before that, they said we couldn't make any decisions for him because he had the right to choose, and that we were trying to take his rights away from him. We weren't trying to take his rights away from him. We were trying to give him the right to live. Because you can take this to the bank tomorrow or tonight. Take it to the bank tonight. You have to be alive to recover. You know, for years, for decades, we've been parking the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. We've got to park it at the top if we plan on saving people. And as Dr. Kalfas said, these are not those people. The people that we're talking about are the people that live in our homes, in our neighborhoods, in our communities, people that we love and care about. They didn't come from Mars, they came from us. There was something that was on the TV last night. I did an interview, and I was a little upset about that I didn't feel like it was reported as it should have been, because I gave a statistic that is pretty powerful, I think. In 2 of our programs at Transitions, just 2 of them, from one county, they ran some numbers yesterday morning, from one county alone, not from all the northern Kentucky counties, from one county alone, there were 83 people on the waiting list just for these 2 programs of Transitions. 81 of them were for heroin. Do you think we've got a problem here? And the problem is urgent. You know, we're not talking about an inanimate object here. We're talking about people's lives. You know, when they were talking about taking Senate Bill 5 back to the legislature in 2015, yes, we can do that. Yes, absolutely we can. But what's going to happen between now and 2015? I can tell you, a lot of people are going to die. I was at a meeting in Austinburg community in Covington on Monday evening with Police Chief Spike Jones. And he stood before the group and he said, if it wasn't for heroin, he said, heroin is what consumes our entire day. That's what he said. Heroin consumes our entire day. And the fire chief that was there, while we were there, got a message that someone had overdosed. While we are here right now, I would be willing to bet that someone has overdosed right now, within the length of time that we've been here this evening. We don't have time. It's been more than a decade. It's been way too long. It's past overdue. Now, I'm going to give you an assignment too. Dr. Kalfas gave you one, I'm going to give you one. And it's something that you do every single day of your life. You talk. I want you to talk about this disease of addiction every chance you get. Take every opportunity and make those opportunities often. Because we have got to end the denial, we've got to stay about the stigma, and we've got to diminish the discrimination that surrounds this disease. If we don't, we're never going to be able to get ahead of this. And as far as, you know, Dr. Kalfas, in an email that we were exchanging emails the other day about needle exchange. You know, for once in our history, we have the opportunity to get in front of an epidemic. You know, we're always cleaning up the mess because we're reactive instead of proactive. I'm telling you, and he's telling you, and I respect Dr. Palfus very much. I respect him probably the most because he issued a public apology to me in front of a crowd of people, that he was one of those people that told me no with Casey. Because at that time, as he told you tonight, he was of that persuasion of having to want to lose enough and hit bottom. We've come a long way since then. Be committed. You know, this is something that we can do, and we can do it together, but it's going to take all of us. And it's going to be a long, hard journey, but I know we can do it. I was so thrilled when other people joined me on this journey, because I was out there by myself beating the drum for a long time before anybody else showed up. I want to thank you for showing up tonight. And I will be outside at the table, the transitions table, if you'd like to talk more about anything that you think I can help you with. And I didn't even mention Casey's Law tonight, but as a result of Casey's death, we have Casey's Law for the state of Kentucky. So we can talk.
Good evening. My name is Jason Merrick, and I'm happy to tell you that I'm one of 22 million people in this country that's in long-term recovery from the disease of addiction. So what that means to me is, as of yesterday, it's been 5 years since I've used drugs or alcohol. It also means I'm able to maintain healthy relationships. I'm able to be a brother to my siblings, or to my siblings and a son. I'm able to hold a job. I'm a student at Northern Kentucky University. I do want to paint for you a picture of what life is like in active addiction for two reasons. I want you to understand that addiction is not a choice. And I want you to learn that the solution is in empathy, in education, and understanding about this disease. I was 25. I was living in Columbus, Ohio. My stepbrother, who was 5 at the time, who I'd never met, my stepmother, and my father were living in San Diego. We decided we were going to rendezvous in Northern California and reunite, get to know each other again. Long story short, my car got stolen, and they decided to come all the way from San Diego to Columbus to pick me up, and we were going to drive across the country together for what I would love to tell you was a beautiful journey where we got reunited and saw the sights that America has to offer, and our trip was anything but that. I had been in active addiction for about 5 years at that time, and I was using every day. 3 days into that journey, I started going into withdrawal. I started experiencing the DTs, auditory and visual hallucinations. I would wake up in pools of my own sweat, not remembering hours prior, screaming profanities, scared my little brother, scared my parents. And it was at that moment that I realized that I was no longer in control. I was willing to do whatever it took to maintain my addiction. Lie to them, steal from the stores along the way, cheat my little brother out of a relationship with his big brother. I lied, cheated, and sold my way across the country with them. Fast forward 25 years of pain and suffering due to the shame and discrimination associated with this disease. I met a girl, fell in love. We had a ranch out in Northern California, 10 acres, which I promptly turned into a giant pot farm and took her and her 2 daughters hostage. Not literally, but figuratively. one day I finally had a moment of clarity, and I approached her and I told her that I had a problem with drugs and alcohol, and that I needed help. And I expected her to leave, and I'd never see her again. But she was educated, she knew what the disease of addiction was, and she was empathetic to my situation, and she pleaded with me to come down from that ranch and get the help that I deserved. We traveled down to San Francisco and to a rehab in the city that it wasn't for me, so we went 100 miles the other direction and up into Humboldt County and the giant redwoods, and there was a rehab center there called Singing Trees that I went through, and I wish I could say that kept me sober, but it didn't. The relationship dissolved, and I found myself in northern Kentucky in the spring of 2009 on the steps of the Grateful Life Center on the 3L Highway. I lived there for 13 months, and I learned, I was introduced to the fellowship, and I developed a relationship with God, higher power, and I was introduced to the world of social work. I saw this team of people, the administrative people at the Grateful Life Center, who were dedicating their lives and their careers to helping people like me get a second chance at life. And I wanted to be a part of that. So I approached the assistant director at that time, a woman named Sandy, and I asked her what I had to do to be of service at that level. And she said 3 things, Jason. You got to get yourself in school, you got to finish this program, and you got to get a job in recovery. So not exactly in that order, but that's what I did. I finished the program, and the day after I left, they hired me at the Grateful Life Center, where I've maintained employment ever since. And I got myself in Northern Kentucky University in the social work program. And along that journey, I was asked to be the chairman of a new grassroots community organization called PAR, People Advocating Recovery in Northern Kentucky. A group dedicated to eliminating the barriers to recovery from addiction. Since then, we've taken on several projects. The most important that I'd like to talk to you about tonight is our naloxone intervention, or the Kentucky naloxone intervention. If you've heard of Narcan or naloxone, it's an opioid antagonist, and without going into a lot of technical jargon, it's the antidote to a heroin addiction, to a heroin overdose. Sorry. It's non-toxic, it's non-addictive, it's safer than ibuprofen. You can't overdose on it, you can't become addicted to it. And as Dr. Kaufman spoke of earlier, when that key goes into that lock, buprenorphine and naloxone or Narcan can remove that key and block anything else from entering that receptor. This is a medication that if someone is on the floor in an overdose, can be injected intramuscularly or a nasal spray up the nose, and it can bring them out of a fatal overdose situation. Some of you, if you've been watching the news at all, we've had one successful documented reversal from one of our kits that's been distributed in the Northern Kentucky region. We have 2 active locations where we are distributing Narcan kits, naloxone kits. The one is in Falmouth at 206 Main Street. Our next day will be May 6th, right? Dr. Callis will be there, I'll be there. Stacy Nance might be there. It's from 3 to 6. So if you know of anybody, and if there's anybody in your family, if your son, your daughter, your loved one, are in the grips of addiction, you need one of these kits. You know, if you yourself, if you're prescribed opioid pain medication, it's not a bad idea to have one of these kits around. It's a safeguard. What if a grandson or a neighbor child or somebody comes over and accidentally gets into those Percocets or into that Vicodin, and you find somebody on the floor that has accidentally ingested opioid painkillers, then you have the antidote. This is what paramedics use on the ambulance. And we're losing too many people and the amount of time that it takes for that ambulance to get there. So House Bill 366, which passed last year and was signed into law, allows for us to prescribe and distribute this medication. There's been a team of people throughout the community that have developed the kits and ordered the medication, and we perform training. It's not just that you come in and give you a kit and good luck to you. We give you an intensive, comprehensive training on how to identify opioid overdose, on how to assemble and administer the naloxone delivery system, and on what to expect after, on resources on how to get that individual into the treatment they need after the reversal. Of course, the most imperative aspect of that is calling 911 and performing rescue breathing, pulmonary resuscitation, keeping the oxygen in the brain and in the body while paramedics are on the way and wait for that Narcan to take effect. A lot of people ask me, what can we do as a community, as an individual, as a family? I get that question all the time at the PAR meetings and when I'm speaking out in the communities. And we narrowed it down to 3 items. You can educate yourself and your family and community. You can participate in grassroots organizations such as PAR or MKY Hates Heroin, Tabitha's Fight. And you can legislate. You can vote, you can promote legislation, you can support legislators that are working tirelessly to advocate for solutions to this disease. We don't really have to go far in this community to find somebody who's been affected by either heroin or opioid painkillers. So I encourage you to find what speaks to you individually, whether it be treatment, whether it was that access to treatment that your nephew or your son or your daughter couldn't get. Research it. Do some research it by yourself. Look online. Talk to people. And then speak to that. Become the expert. Become the expert in your field of interest. So I really thank all of you for coming out tonight. This is a community problem and it is a community solution. A couple other resources that are available to you in November as our next, and a couple speakers down the line will talk to you about. In November, we released a plan for Northern Kentucky called Northern Kentucky's Collective Response to the Heroin Epidemic. This is a comprehensive plan developed by many organizations throughout the Northern Kentucky area to address this problem on many levels. I don't want to steal Bonnie's thunder, as I'm pretty sure she's going to talk to you about that. Once again, thank you, and please keep up the good work. Next, Alex Hamilton, another good man in long-term recovery.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Alex Hamilton. I'm also one of millions of people in long-term recovery, which means I haven't used any drugs or alcohol in 2.5 years. Thank you. I've been told that the reason that I've been put on this panel is to pretty much just share my experience, to let you guys know that addiction isn't a disease from which there is no recovery. Recovery is possible and it's happening every day. It's inevitable that with the epidemic and everything else going on, that the problem is very real, but what also is very real is the solution. And these people in recovery, such as myself or Jason, they're with you every day in society, and a lot of times we don't even realize it because it's an anonymous thing. And I'm sure whether you know it or not, they're either in your workplace or so on and so forth. A little bit about my story. I grew up in a household where the disease of addiction was the only thing that was really evident. It was the only thing that I really knew. It was very real. And for a very, very long time, I didn't know that there was anything like recovery. I thought that this was the cards that I was dealt. This is how I'm going to have to live my life, and that I'm going to die like this. Because nobody ever told me anything about recovery or anything about any kind of solution. And I don't necessarily agree with the fact that they say you have to lost everything or yada yada yada, because my experience is that I got clean at 18 years old. Although I was homeless, although I did not have nowhere to go, all of the same stigma and stuff, if I can do it at the age of 18, anybody can do it. At the end of my journey with active addiction, I found myself homeless in Boone County, sleeping in a laundromat, pretty much begging for death because what I was living was no kind of life. After I got tired of doing that and going through the same daily routines, I made a leap of faith, and I walked down to St. Elizabeth out in Florence and signed myself into the psych ward. Not necessarily because I wanted to stop using, but because I wanted a bed to sleep in, because I wanted something to eat, because I wanted to take a shower. It had been a while. And when I got there, my life took off without my permission. I didn't know what was around the corner. And there were so many resources that was available to me, and it pretty much demolished the wall of denial that I had up until that point. From there, I went to the Falmouth Care Unit, and from the Falmouth Care Unit, where I spent 15 days, I went to the Grateful Life Center. Made it to the Grateful Life Center November 8th of 2011, and I graduated the Grateful Life Center February 19th of 2013. So I spent 16 months there, and there I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about who I really was. Not no false bravado, not no thinking all the stuff that I had thought. And what I've come to realize in this time that I've spent in recovery is this is truly a gift, you know, and I'm real grateful that it exists, and I'm real grateful that I get to be a part of it, and it changes so many lives. Prior to recovery, the best way I can describe how I felt on the inside was that I was lost. I had no purpose, no sense of direction. Everybody had given up on me, so therefore I had practically given up on myself, and I didn't think that there was a way out. Now, since I've been in recovery, every single one of those things have done a complete 180, 360. I have a purpose today. I live a life to its fullest. I live in a world now where dreams are no longer dreams. We have the opportunity to make them reality, and I'm grateful for that. I can remember not spending time with my son. I can remember avoiding any kind of responsibility and just wanting to run. And today, I get to be a father. Today, I get to be a responsible, productive member of society. Just a few months ago, I just got a job doing an apprenticeship for some sort of construction work, and it's just amazing. You know what I mean? Like that's things that I never thought that I would ever be doing. I thought that I would be stuck in either downtown Cincinnati, under a bridge, or ultimately a jail or an institution. And that's just not the reality today. One of the things that I really want to stress is that the longer we stay in denial about a problem, the harder it is to move towards a solution. And what I mean when I say that is before we can come to any kind of solution and take any kind of action towards getting out of the problem, first we have to accept the problem for what it is in its entirety. How are we going to accept the solution if we haven't fully accepted the problem? And that's the intent here that we're trying to do today, is to raise awareness, to let you know that this isn't a fairy tale, this isn't a myth. Like, it's obvious that the disease of addiction is real and it's destroying lives, and I guarantee it's touched at least one person that every single person sitting in this room knows. But on the same token, recovery is not a myth either. It's real and it's available. When I got clean, I didn't necessarily know if I wanted to get clean. But I seen something that other people had, and I couldn't put a finger on exactly what it was, and all I knew was that it looked a lot better than what I had. And they were going in a better direction than any direction that I was going anytime soon, and that's what I was attracted to. That's what made me want to stay. That's what gave me enough courage to try something different. So if we don't let people know that recovery is real, and people like myself to be examples, then we're just avoiding the real issue. If you would have told me that at the bottom of my journey, where the best way I can think of to describe it once again is utter hopelessness, what I was going to find, I probably would have told you that you were a liar. And I'm here to tell you today that what I found at rock bottom was a life full of purpose and passion and compassion and empathy and understanding and caring and an attitude of being of service. It's no longer today about what can I take from life, it's about what can I bring to life. And that's all due to recovery. I want to share one more thing with you, and then I'm gonna pass. My great grandmother growing up, she used to always tell me this saying, and it's one of those things that has just stuck with me throughout my whole life. Because as a little kid, whenever I would get in trouble, I would always want to cast blame on somebody else. Like it was them, or if they wouldn't have done that, I wouldn't have done this, or whatever. And what she told me was, there is no them. There's only us. We're all in this together. Everyone stands together. And that's all that I have.
After you. I'm gonna let you introduce you.
I'll do it, but you probably wouldn't want to give me the mic.
Hello, my name is Bonnie Hedrick. I'm with the Northern Kentucky Agency for Substance Abuse Policy Board, the Prevention Alliance. And I want you all to appreciate the position I'm in right now as the last speaker. Over time, with a lot of people wanting to get home. But I want to, I'm not going to abandon this PowerPoint presentation, but I'm not going to go all through it. I'm going to send it to someone who's going to post it on their website right here in Campbell County. And I'll tell you who that's going to be. And you can see everything that's on there. I want to talk about, sometimes I do object lessons. In a minute, I'm going to need you to do that, Jim. I want to talk a minute about, rather than go behind here, watch me, I'm going to fall off the stage. This young man right here, 18 years old, he got clean, and he struggled through treatment, and he struggled through his childhood, and now he's got a life full of possibility before him. He represents potential. Every child in America is born to that. We all have the opportunity to create environments around those children to make that potential grow to everything it can be. Unfortunately, there are those young people, if you don't mind my giving your Alex as an example, who don't always have all those resources around them. And those are the ones like Alex that we cannot forget when we think about potential. And part of my work with the Heroin Impact Response Team, with People Advocating Recovery, is helping to find resources to bring that potential back to life for those young men and women. And so a lot of my work, a lot of my training is focused on young children, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But I have learned, I spent 30 years over at the University of Cincinnati pushing paper, attending meetings, and creating policy at the state level. Since I've been in Northern Kentucky in 1 year, I've learned more about prevention and addiction and substance abuse than I ever knew in my life. Because guess what? I started talking to people who have lived it. So, potential. We cannot forget those young people who are coming out of treatment, who have not had those resources around them that we can now create. Now then, Jim, I'm going to tell you who I'm going to post this PowerPoint to. Did you know that in Campbell County there is an alliance? It's called this is Alliance for Healthy Youth, but that's actually Boone County. I work with 9 coalitions in the Northern Kentucky region, and one of those coalitions is the Campbell County Drug-Free Alliance. We have representatives here from that group tonight. Many of the partners on that group represent many sectors of the community. And they just wrote a grant, a federal drug-free communities grant, to bring money into this area to address not only opioid abuse, but also other drug abuse. Because often young people do not start with opiates. They start with alcohol. They start with marijuana, smoking. And so we cannot overlook, when we're talking about the youngest children, that we have to prevent those kinds of things as well. The Campbell County Drug-Free Alliance is, thank you, Jim, Meets monthly the first Wednesday of each month at the Alexandria City Building, right? It's near the police department. And they have a YouTube channel, and it has videos on there. Dr. Kalfas, I saw you there. Lots of information. Jim. These are some of their partners. The school district. Mr. Kerry Hill is one of their regular attenders. And the police department, Brighton Center, Silver Grove Christian Church, North Peak Community Care, Plum Creek, you can read them all. Many different partners. And these are the things I wanted to do with you tonight. You've heard a lot of information. I'm telling you, I have heard, I've gotten calls from newspapers, television shows, Associated Press today after Senate Bill 5 went down last night, calling me as part of the Kentucky Agency for Substance Abuse Policy, asking me, well, okay, now what are you going to do at the local level now that this state legislation hasn't passed? So now what we have been doing today is thinking about, okay, what can we do? One, to re-energize interest around Senate Bill 5, but also, what can we do? What on earth can we do? And we're going to have to find some local solutions, and we're working really hard on that. And one way we're working on that will be through our community coalitions, the Campbell County Drug-Free Alliance. Let me tell you about a system. I often describe myself as a systems engineer. What does that look like, and what on earth does that mean? Well, last week at the Heroin Impact Response Team, the group that created that plan that Jim held up, we created that plan. A lot of different agencies, organizations, representing many different sectors across northern Kentucky, all 8 counties. We rolled out that plan in November. Last week we had a meeting. Someone brought up the notion of 30 needles. 30 needles in public places. 30 needles in light of Easter egg hunts. 30 needles in light of roadside cleanup, public parks, along the riverbanks. And what are we going to do? Well, let me tell you how systems work. PAR is going to be organizing needle exchange, or not needle exchange, but needle cleanups. Because Easter was here and we knew Easter eggs hunts were going to happen, we created some information on our website at drugfreenky.org. Please visit it. That's where you'll find and can download the full Heroin Impact Response Team and other updates on our activities. But the way the system worked is I immediately contacted my county coalition chairs. Alan Grimke, which you'll see a picture of in a minute in the next slide, is the current chair of the Campbell County Alliance. I'm going to have my water. And so I contacted her and all my other chairs. And I said, please contact your police departments. And I want you to know that Alan did. And she was able to immediately activate police searches of those areas. I'm sorry. She was immediately able to activate those police searches of those areas to ensure that the areas were clean. We did that across 8 counties in northern Kentucky. That's how a system works. So what I want to leave you with tonight is you must get involved. Campbell County Drug-Free Alliance has a Facebook page. This is it. They only have 247 likes on that page. I've got to tell you, I lived in Campbell County 20 years, and I know there's more than 247 people here. So please, if you're on Facebook, go there and like that page, because I'll tell you what, that's where they're posting up the updates on activities that they're doing. Get involved with Campbell County Alliance, attend their meetings, and support them any way you can. This is one of the events that's going to be happening real soon. It's up at the First Baptist Church in Cold Spring. It's at Hope Expo. There will be a special guest speaker that day on heroin. It's Dr. Jeremy Engel, who led some of our activities last year. Next slide, Jim. Charlotte mentioned how many more people are going to die, how many people have died since Casey died. I can tell you that over 1,200 have died in the last 3 years. 1,200 young people.
Next slide, Jan. In terms of ages, the largest percentage of people, 16 to 25 who overdosed at St. Elizabeth's emergency rooms. 33% of the people who overdosed were between the ages of 16 and 25. We must start reaching and doing prevention early. 41% up to the age of 35. So you can see the majority of young people, this is a problem that's affecting people under the age of 35 primarily. In terms of counties, take a look at that. Where does Campbell County fall? 16% of those overdoses came from Campbell County. 46% came from Kenton, 17% from Boone, and 21% from the other counties. Next slide. This is the last thing I want to leave with you, and that is the kinds of individuals who are more likely to overdose. It does, in terms of sex, male, female, not very much difference. Young women are getting as involved in heroin as young men. In terms of financial class, non-discriminatory. It happens everywhere. Charlotte talked about today she got some good news. Well, I got bad news today. I retired from the University of Cincinnati about 3 years ago and moved out to a retirement community in Bitter County. Quiet little street, and I thought, no maintenance, you know how that goes? Well, today I discovered that the furry thing that was living underneath my front step was back, and that's very disconcerting to me. I walked up the street and was talking to my neighbor whose house was vandalized this week because, and the front door of his garage was painted. You did wrong, now wrong's going to follow you. His windshield was broken out. Drug dealers came to my street this week because of the involvement of one of his grandsons. So that's very bad news for people who live in quiet little communities who go there and retire and think everything's going to be very copacetic the rest of their lives. That hurt for me. But anyway, prevention is something that we can all do. On the website or on the rest of the PowerPoint that I'm not going to go over, there's a lot of information about what people with very young children can do. Prevention is something that must start early, and it needs to continue. A lot of it's happening through your school system. I cannot applaud them enough, and they're going to continue. Campbell County Alliance is also doing a lot of prevention activities, and one of the slides that we jumped over was Take Back Day. April 26th is Take the Prescriptions Back. If you have them in your home, we need to get them out. That is an organized National Take Back Day. The police departments have these, you can take the prescriptions any day of the week, can't you? Here? It's usually the way it is in most counties, that you can take your prescriptions to those police departments any day of the week. You can return them in and get them out of your home, because most kids are getting into heroin because they're using the leftover drugs in their parents' medicine cabinet. That's it, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Lisa Roger.
Okay. I don't want to say that very much, because I'm cheat sheet. I wanted to talk to you tonight. We've heard a lot of information about addiction, how to treat it, how to prevent it. But the part that I thought that always was missed from these town halls was how addiction affects the family. Every one of us, it's known that every substance abuser, they affect at least 8 lives, whether that be a spouse, parents, siblings, children. There are 8 lives that are touched, and this is an area that no one seems to, it's rather ignored. But when addiction comes to your house, it creates pure havoc, chaos. Everyone moves their footing. Even the pets know that something's wrong. Something is very, very wrong and going on, but nobody can really put their finger on it. And so I wanted to talk to you about getting support for yourself if you, in fact, are a family member that is living with someone that is in active addiction. You know, we get confused, and when we find out that someone that we love has this problem, the first thing we say is, you know, how could this have happened? You know, where was I? What happened? But it happens very easily. And we ourselves mirror the same symptoms as the family members that our addict has. They lie to us. We lie for them. We make excuses. They isolate. We ourselves do too. We no longer associate with the friends that we used to. We don't go around our family members, so we isolate also. They think they can stop. We think we can fix them. They spend 24 hours drug seeking. We, as parents, spend all of our waking hours obsessing over not letting them drug seek. We snoop, we look through phones, we look through the trash, we look in their cars, we follow them. We are just as addicted as they are. That's how easy it happens. But we're just not addicted to an illicit drug. So when I came to the realization that this was true, that I was addicted to the ones that I love, I realized that I needed to get help because somebody had to get better and get a plan to make the decisions that needed to be made. When you're running on pure emotion, you can't think clearly, and there's a lot of decisions that need to be made. So the whole reason that I'm talking to you tonight is that I encourage, if addiction is in your home, or you know someone that's experiencing this, there is a ton of support for you as family members. Whether that be that you seek counseling on your own, family counseling. A lot of employees have employee assistance programs. It's way buried in their handbooks. They never even knew what it's for. If you haven't, call. There are support groups everywhere that all over. I've seen a ton of them on Facebook now. But you need to get support. You need to not blame yourself. You need to realize that you didn't cause this, you can't control it, and you certainly can't cure it. Seek the help that you need for the support that'll get you through it so that you can make the rational decisions that need to be made for your loved one. There are a ton of resources out there, and I encourage you to visit all of Ms. Tammy's. Thank you very much.
I failed to let my co-speaker, Tony from the Campbell County Alliance, tell you about something that's going to raise some money for Campbell County Alliance. So,
just real quickly, I'm with the Drug Free Alliance, one of the community partners, and what we have here is we have raffle tickets that we're trying to sell for the pickiest raffle of all. If you go to our table, you'll be able to go see back here. They're going back there and go to the table. They're selling for $5, and that donation gives you a chance to win a 2-year lease on Toyota, but it also gives money back into your community to help put on things like this, educate and promote, way to help get this community drug free. So we're thankful that you came out and be able to help support us today. Thank you.
This is really a tough job because I'm supposed to keep these people in time. We do have time for questions, and if anybody in the audience has a question. Yes, sir.
I have a question. Are healthcare providers recognizing that opiate addiction is treatment for individuals?
Our healthcare
Long-term treatment.
recognizing addiction
Long-term treatment.
Treatment, paying for treatment.
By healthcare providers, you mean like, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
I take it you mean like, are doctors recognize the need for treatment? Or doctors, or when you say healthcare providers? Insurance carriers. Oh, insurance carriers. Yeah, they recognize the need for it. Unfortunately, a lot of times their response to that recognition is to write it out as a policy or to limit it. And one of the things that the American Society of Addiction Medicine advocates very avidly are something called parity laws. Parity laws vary in states around the country, but what the gist of them is that it forces insurance companies to recognize that addictions and disease, just like diabetes or lung cancer or heart disease, and make them man up and cover the treatment. Kentucky's working on those laws. One of the good things that came out of the Affordable Care Act, aka Obamacare, was the provision for parity. So a lot of people have pros and cons, but what they like about that, people have pros and cons what they like about the Affordable Care Act, but it does provide for parity, which is one of the bonuses in it. So that's another thing that you guys could do to advocate on a state level. Let your legislators know when things come up. We want parity. We want this covered like a disease. We want the treatment. Unfortunately, there is a big disparity. I think the one slide Dr. Hedrick put up there showed 12% people affected have commercial health insurance, and a lot of those carriers pay very little for the treatment. Or, one thing I went into when I was medical director at Falmouth, one of my big frustrations is they would put in their brochure, we cover X amount of treatment, but then when you get there, we try to pre-cert the patient for it, and they come up with an excuse why they didn't qualify. Like they do better in a lower level of treatment or whatever. And that needs to stop. Unfortunately, that's but there are, as you'll see when you look outside, there's some referral lists out in the foyer. There are plenty of resources that you could use. I mean, and fortunately, as a society, we've stepped up, and there's other avenues that you can get treatment. If somebody really wants treatment, they can get it. Unfortunately, the waiting lists are long, but we're fixing that. You get to look at our document that came out that we were mentioning. We're fixing it.
Yes, ma'am.
Is Vivitrol commonly dispensed through our physicians? Especially like with Obamacare, that have to get it, especially coming out of a treatment facility?
What Vivitrol is an opioid blocker. And if you think back to those B receptors that I mentioned earlier, and I'll be quick, it binds those B receptors up and covers them so they're not empty, you're not craving as badly, and if you do use, you don't get that intense pleasure from using, so the behavior will extinguish. It's been around in an oral form for years, but as a pill, the pill only works if people take it. With Vivitrol, they show up once a month, they get the shot. Now, it is not a controlled substance, so there's no limitation. Any doctor could. Unfortunately, many of them won't. They want to call me and ask me to do it, which I work in as many as I can. I give about 30 shots a month of it. I really wish I could do a lot more. We're working on venues to make that happen. It is quite expensive. However, you have to keep that. Think of it as a treatment, not a medication. If you go in and get a treatment for your rheumatoid arthritis every month, like Humira or something, that's going to cost a lot of money. This treatment, the shot does, I won't talk price, but it's not cheap, but there are avenues to get it. The drug company will knock off 60% of it. If somebody really, really wants it, I could get it for them. But,
Do you feel comfortable talking about the possibility of it being court ordered?
Actually, Jim's question was about it being court ordered. I see a day when that happens. What you got to realize with any of these medications we're talking about, I like my analogy of it being a tool. You know, you look at the tools that are in a plumber's bag, he's only going to use the right one at the right time. And not every tool is going to fit every person at the right time. But I could see instances where it would be beneficial, including it being court ordered. One of the judge executive in another county and I had a long discussion about the potential of making it a condition of release on certain types of charges, for example. So there is a way that the justice system may be able to utilize this drug as well to encourage people into treatment as opposed to incarceration if it's appropriate.
Yes, ma'am.
With the overcrowding in the jails now, which is a lot of the heroin addicts, and you say that Suboxone can be given once they're 7 days sober, is it a possibility that these addicts that are in there could possibly be given Suboxone and given the proper counseling that they're not getting now if they so choose?
I'll try to answer that as quick as Jeannie, I'll try to answer that as quick as I can because that's a really complex question. I could go on for an hour, but I won't on that one. However, actually, I think we got a little confused. Suboxone can be given while they're detoxing. It's usually started while they're in acute withdrawal. Vivitrol is the one that we give after they've been sober for 7 days. One of the reasons to give a drug like Vivitrol or Suboxone is to keep someone from succumbing to the craving. If you've got someone in a controlled environment, then other treatment that may not include Suboxone would be beneficial. I mean, if it's a captive audience, if it's someone that can't sign themselves out and leave. As a matter of fact, and I won't spill too much, but there are meetings going on right now with Campbell County's leadership, and I've been to 2 of them already, where we're discussing the possibility of doing just that, actually having a program within the system that certain people that meet certain qualifications can be diverted into a treatment program. And it's unlikely that I'm going to get Suboxone covered for those folks, but maybe the oral form of the Vivitrol shot, the naltrexone pill, to help them with their mental stability while they go through a treatment program and progress as an alternative to going to, say, the penitentiary or something like that. That is in the works, actually. Our leaders are becoming very responsive to that concept, and we're working on it. I wish we were a lot further, but we're getting there.
Can I add some information about that?
Please do.
Thank you. I'm a criminal attorney here in Campbell County, and
She's one of the ones I met with. So.
The question is, can it be done right now? No. And a lot of it is because of misinformation. Dr. Kaufman and I were at that same meeting this week, and one of the things that we expressed to him was that there was a gap between law enforcement and individuals advocating recovery. And I think it's a misconception that's led to that gap. We want treatment. We absolutely do. But because there's been that gap, the communication has not gone back and forth. So I've got judges that I work with who are uneducated on these issues. They'll probably admit it. And we need to do a better job of having you all up there work with us who are seeing this as well every day, because our goals are the same. Detective Marcus is there. If you notice, he didn't talk about putting users in prison. He talked about putting dealers in prison, the people that are bringing the poison and putting it in the hands of users. That's our goal, to put the dealers that aren't addicts away, so that we can get help for the addicts. But we all have to absolutely work well. I was just saying to the individuals in Grateful Life, my best successes have been those individuals that have gone to Grateful Life. So we are in favor of it, and we need to do a better job of letting them know so that eventually we get to that point where we can get individuals out of the jail and into treatment. And it really, that's why we have these meetings, is to work towards that end.
Thank you very much for that comment. I'd like to add to that as part of the Heroin Impact Response Team follow-up and action plan, there is a team of individuals forming that includes the judge executives, law enforcement, and others. who are going to work specifically on that issue with the attorneys and to really find some solutions for it. And one of the reasons, the promise for that is, I'm sure you know, it costs more to jail them than it does to treat them. So if we can hopefully reduce the recidivism rate, we will save money in the long run.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to stand straight in the sheriff's everyone up here has done a great job of covering all aspects of the problem. But there's one area that I feel like it's the weakest area, and that's including prevention. And I'm wondering if there is, and I'm not blaming schools, it's parenting is the number one way to fight this. But we have a captive audience in our schools. And I'm just wondering if there are any plans, I don't know if this question goes to you. Are there any plans to come up with a really good education program for, say, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade?
I think we want to begin before the 5th grade.
Before we get to that, 16 to 25-year-old, 33%
Right.
on the grant. But, yeah.
I want to walk up there and shake your hand because when I've been to a lot of these meetings and when I go to the meetings that we have, and everybody up here knows that one time or another I'm going to use the word prevention. And prevention really is early on, right on through. You have some information you can share.
Yeah, I hope we can scare that. It's that, when you push the fear on these young kids.
I wanted to maybe follow up with what Rodney said with, maybe it would be helpful if I explain one thing. This document that Dr. Hedrick's holding up here, how that came about, it came about as a bunch of individuals, Dr. Jeremy Engel, myself, Dr. Hedrick, several other, Charlotte, other individuals, recognizing that we had a problem. We all came together, Jim, several others in this meeting. We just started meeting, and we started to say we identified the areas that we needed to work on. And prevention is definitely a huge arm of that. Although you haven't seen much action on that because we decided as a group, the first thing that needed to be done is we needed to stop the dying, okay? Because like Charlotte said, dead people can't sign into rehab. So that was the very first thing we went after, the first piece of low-hanging fruit was that naloxone bill. To get that passed so we can put the tool to save lives in people's hands. And then we've met, we've continued, we've ran numbers, we've ran statistics on how many treatment beds are needed, we've made the recommendation, all that is in there. A comprehensive plan is outlined in this document. Now obviously people are going to have to come together and fill in the different blanks of this. This is a start, this is an outline to get going. It's not a checklist, but we're hoping that these things are being taken. And now different members of us on this committee are one at a time going to the places that we can influence to try to make these things happen. We're going to the people that can build the treatment beds for us. We're going to the people, the community services that can lead the education piece. I mean, those things are being worked on. I mean, but it's not as simple as having another DARE program because, the Let's Say No program, it didn't work for a while. So we can't just reinvent that. We have to come up with something new. And we're working on it.
One of the things I think many of us here are very disappointed about was Senate Bill 5 did not pass. It didn't even get the chance to be voted on. And it had components in it for additional funding for prevention. And as Bonnie pointed out earlier, there's 9 different champion organizations whose primary focus is prevention. And you have something to say about that?
Actually, one of the biggest pieces, and I don't know, my name is Erin Riggs. I actually work for North Key with a juvenile substance abuse program. But one of the biggest things that's going on right now, and I see Judge Popovich back there, and we've also got Carrie Hill, is that there is a Campbell County Collaborative meeting going on. It's quarterly right now, and your juvenile judges are working very hard to understand this. And they're really trying to start at a status level, the kids who aren't coming to school, the kids who are not behaving in the classes, and they're working really hard on status reform, and I'm not going to go into it because it's forever, but I can assure you that the step 2, from keeping them not dying, and then moving down the pipe of kind of recognizing the problems a little bit more quickly so that we can start some of the prevention has been a huge piece and really is in motion. The wheels are turning, referrals are happening, kids aren't going to detention as much, they're getting treatment, they're getting, you know, the services that they need, and I'm like a little tiny part of that, but I can assure you we're trying, so.
Jim, can I say something?
Yes, ma'am.
You know, as I told you, I was a teacher for 27 years and retired from teaching, and I know that there's a program through NIDA, the National Institute on Drug Abuse, that I'm fairly sure does not cost a penny, that would be an evidence-based program that teaches about the physiology of the brain, that approaches it from a totally different standpoint than DARE did. I've mentioned this in different schools. I don't know that it's ever taken hold or anybody's put legs to it, but there are programs out there. And I think that and this, I'm sorry how this may sound, but I was, like I said, I was a teacher. And I know that any time that a program was introduced, that they added on to the curriculum, all the teachers started backing up and said, I don't want one more thing to do. So I think that one of the things that will have to happen is that you'll have to have buy-in from the teachers. You'll have to have buy-in from the staff that, you know, they see the need for it and they're part of making the decision and buying into it. Because if they're forced into it, and unfortunately I do think that some of the schools have backed up from it because they don't want to appear as a school that has problems. Now that's the fact. I'm just calling it as I see it. And I know that when I first started speaking, schools were some of the hardest places to get into.
One of the reasons I brought this up is the first meeting like this that I went to Dr. Callis spoke about heroin, how it affects the brain. And I'm sitting there thinking, if I'm in the 5th, 6th grade and I hear this, I'm scared to death. And that's the motivation I want to use to get kids not to go down that path.
I spoke to 3rd graders a couple of weeks ago in Boone County, and my presentation was, I took capsules that if you drop them in water, a sponge comes out. You've probably seen those. Casey had them when he was a little kid. So I talked to the students about how that they have something in their brains that, you know, it's kind of like Pandora's box. Once it's open, it's out there, and they may have a brain that is, you know, genetically predisposed to addiction. But if they never put a substance in their brain, you know, there won't be a problem. So the only way that they will know that they'll never become addicted is never to use the first time. So I said, you know, we've got these capsules, and they were all different colors. And there were a lot that were red, but I said, you know, just because this one is red doesn't mean this other red one is going to have the same thing in it. So I used some analogies there, trying to get them to see, and then each one of them took one of those capsules home with them, hopefully as a reminder that, you know, they don't know if they're going to be the person who tries it and their brain says, woo-hoo, I like that and I want more. And so, you know, that's kind of what I did, you know, with my presentation. So, you know, that wasn't, but that's something that needs to be done on a regular basis, not just once a year.
Prevention is a science. There's been a lot of research that's gone into what works and what doesn't. We know that drug education, facts and figures go a long way. We also know that there's a list of other things that must be in place around those children. And there's a lot of focus now in schools on building social and emotional health of kids, building relationships among key responsible, good role models in the schools and in the communities. Good research that supports those initiatives are just as important as quality drug education. The Prevention Alliance with the Northern Kentucky ASAP Board works with all of the 9 coalitions. Camden County Alliance is one, Pendleton County is one,
And one of the things that we're doing with our partners there, North Key is one of our partners, is to help schools establish those evidence-based practices that we know have been proven to be most effective. Scare tactics, though I personally think that there's some value in that, really in science shows that it doesn't have a lot of effect, long-term effect. It may do something immediate, but it doesn't have a long-lasting effect. So we are working to produce, to work with our school systems. And honestly, and I will tell you that it's not because I'm sitting in Campbell County, but I do know that there are many wonderful programs that are operating here to build the social and emotional well-being of your students. And that is a value, and we need to continue to support those things as much as possible.
It's all about teaching the kids to make, and all of us to make the right choices at the right time. Yes, ma'am.
We've done stop the drugs from coming out of Cincinnati. Well, as I said before, we have 2 narcotics units that work, and well, there's actually more than 2. Kent County operates their own street-level narcotics unit. The Covington Police Department operates their own. The North Kentucky Drug Strike Force, which is a multi-jurisdictional agency, operates Boone Campbell County. And then there's the Campbell County Drug Task Force. All of us work really well with Cincinnati Police Department. I currently have an active investigation going on right now where Cincinnati Police pretty much bent over backwards for me to give me whatever I needed on my suspect and help me identify a big heroin trafficker in about 3 days' time from that photo. We're also working well with the federal agencies, the DEA, the ATF, the FBI as well. We've always had a good relationship with them as well as those other agencies, the North Kentucky Drug Strike Force. Covington, I know, has people assigned to these federal task forces that operate out of Cincinnati and to try to work on the upper end of the drug trafficking when it comes into the larger dealers and then working their way back to the drug cartels and stuff out of the country.
Yes, ma'am.
Churches that are involved in Campbell County alone with the Drug-Free Alliance. You know, we're trying to be actively involved in it now.
And for me, I don't go to my church and ask for.
And I'm not going to apologize if I offend anyone with what I'm about to say. I totally, and Jim's going to grin on this because he's had to hear me say it about 100,000 times, but you know, when you look at the 12 steps in AA, and I'm sorry I didn't get to mention this more, I guess that's a shortcoming on my part. I feel like I just, a couple months ago, Dr. Hedrick asked me to do a lecture for her, and I started talking, and 3 hours later we were done. So sometimes I have to cut it short because people want to go home. But the reality is, when you look at your 12 steps, your first step is that I admit that I'm powerless, and that I need the help of a higher power to overcome it. And when you sit in an AA meeting, they'll tell you that your higher power can be the chair, the doorknob, whatever gets you through today. I'm sorry, but Bill W., the founder of AA, fully intended for that to be God. But an AA meeting should not be an argument over theology. You take that somewhere else, that belongs in another place. But truth be told, I know very few people, if anyone, that has a 20-year coin, 25-year coin from AA, for whom God is not their higher power. So I'm a servant of Jesus Christ. That's why I do what I do here. That's why I put my time in on this, because I'm following these commandments. And like I said, you know, if I don't want that to be a barrier to anybody tonight. I'm just making that statement, but I totally agree with this lady that spoke. And I'm glad you spoke up where I didn't. So thank you.
But the judges and everyone else that are creating this treatment facility in Campbell County realize that it's more than just putting them on drugs or putting them on another drug. It's more about emotional, spiritual, and everything else that has to go into this total recovery program. It's not just a drug. It's bigger than
Absolutely.
that. And it's not just that. It's also, once they've recovered, now how do you make them a functioning member of society with job, health, and interviewing and everything else?
I want to make it perfect.
How do you get a copy of this booklet, and how do you give any feedback to this plan? And go ahead, Mike.
So that's fine. All I wanted to say was, when I talk about using medications, I certainly do not mean to advocate that they are any kind of supplement for spirituality. Absolutely. I'm talking about feeding a brain that needs to be fed. Jesus himself fed people before he taught them the gospel. I mean, one of Jesus's functions when you read your Old Testament or your New Testament is that he met physical needs to prepare people to receive his message. So likewise, sometimes these folks have a physical need that needs to be met, and it's brain stabilization through chemistry. And I'm okay with that. I'm not saying when I say someone needs a medication that they don't need God as part of their treatment plan. I totally agree with that, and I think you're exactly right. The idea of a 12-step program, 12 steps are an outline for anyone looking to fix their broken life and better it. And it's like the instruction manual for fixing a broken life, and they're very relevant. However, the longevity of that fixing job is going to depend on their spirituality. That's my personal belief. And any program that's going to be successful treating that is going to include that. Obviously, on a governmental level, because of the country we live in, we're going to have to be careful about advocating one path or another. Most of the pathways, like in the justice system and anywhere else, are going to have the opportunity for input from those in church groups, those in the spiritual groups that want to volunteer to help. But that's where I'm going to put it back on people. You want to. I only know a handful of people that have jail ministries. Okay, you want it there. Jesus didn't tell you to tell other people to go out and do stuff. He told you to do it. Everybody's got to be a part of this. So every follower of Christ has to get out and do it. It's not just telling somebody else to do it.
That's a good place. I'm sorry, the time is up. They'll be around for questions, and there's a lot more information. This booklet is out there as well. And I think it's time for you all to give yourself a hand, as well as a hand for the camera.